This is All Things Caregiving from Breathing Spaces.
Hi, my name is Cindy Mariner. I'm the founder of Breathing Spaces. Welcome to an all-new episode of All Things Caregiving. I'm here today with my co-host, Cindy Gum, and we are really happy to have today with us a special guest, Dr. Allan Gold. Allan, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Cindy, I'm going to turn this over to you at this point as you have known Allan for some years for a proper introduction.
Well, you just did a good one yourself. Thank you, Cindy. And Allan and I go back many years. We were in high school together, and he's a very special person. And I got to know that he was I understand he was a caregiver like I was. We had lost touch for some years, and I had not known Allan during many of those caregiving years. He was a long-term spousal caregiver. And I actually asked Allan to write a story for the book that will be on Breathing Spaces that's coming up called The Resilient Caregiver. And he kindly wrote some of his story about having been a caregiver for many years. And so welcome, Allan. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know how much wisdom you have. You're a clinical psychologist by training and a caregiver for many years. And I think you have a lot of wisdom to share. And I thought I'd perhaps start us off with a quote from your story that was written. And it had to do with you having referred to the deep emotional terrain that comes with loving someone through decline. Very unique to caregivers that it's not going to get better. It's not as though you think this will get better over time. It will not. So that was a very impactful statement to me. So I wonder if you'd love to just hop in here and share your experience and your story with other caregivers.
Sure. Thank you very much. So, the person that I had the most caregiving experience with was my husband. His name was Allan, too. Um, we met in 1995 and married in 1999. And then in 2003, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which he had supposedly gotten through exposure to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War when he was stationed in Korea. And my experience with caregiving wasn't a lot, interestingly enough. My mother lived to be 93, but my father was alive at the time, taking care of her. He lived 6 more years. He was almost 105 when he died, but he had caregivers at home. So I didn't, and I'm an only child, but I didn't feel the intense burden of caregiving. And another experience, a part of my history was observing people during the AIDS epidemic. A lot of young men were with partners, but they weren't able to take care of their partners, maybe because they were in their 20s and 30s and had never had to deal with that before. So the experience for me was really kind of new. Now, fortunately, Allan's decline was very slow. Um, he was taken care of by the Veterans Administration. Um, and at first, he was taking medication the first few years, and that helped. He still had a job. He was a nurse, and then he bought um, a needlepoint store in San Francisco and kept that until 2010. And then he gave it up. But it was really probably 15 years of his um, Parkinson's decline before it really began to hit. Um, so fortunately, we had some home care with through the VA. But he didn't need a lot of that. He gave up driving about 5 or 6 years ago. And then the care we were able to even travel until 2017. We took a long trip to not a long trip, 3 weeks to Japan and South Korea. Um, but little by little, it declined. What was hardest for me, I think, was the mental decline. I could help him with his physical challenges. I'm a very fast walker, and he was slow. And in San Francisco, when it's a cold wind, you don't like to walk slowly. But I had to adjust to that. So I'm thankful for the adjustments and the time to adjust. Another thing that we did for probably about 6 or 7 years, the VA had a monthly group meeting for patients and their caregivers. And we started going to that once a month. It was in person, it was before COVID. And there was usually about a half an hour with the patients and caregivers together, and then the caregivers were separated, and there was a counselor, chaplain woman who was very, very good, and we could listen to other people's stories, and I felt very fortunate actually because there were many patients who required 24/7 caregiving from their partners. So I felt very fortunate. Now, ultimately, I ended up in that boat. Um, but anyway, it was an important lesson for me. This is what might be down the road, so that I was psychologically prepared for more and more caregiving. But the hardest part for me, as I said, was the mental decline. He had hallucinations. He Some of which were silly. Early on, like by 2018 or something, he recognized that they were not real. Like he would see gorillas in the bedroom and things like that. Um,
How
but
did you help him with that, Alan? With your skill set, I'm wondering because there may be people dealing with that right now.
Right.
Do you have any words of wisdom around dealing with that? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, at first he realized that they were
Okay.
hallucinations, but in the last year or so, he would hallucinate. I mean, he would say that nurses were attacking him, or there was a horse outside the window, or something like that. So I think one of the challenges that I had was, do I confront these statements,
Right.
or do I sort of ignore them? And that was challenging because the human inclination is to say, no, that's not true. That can't be. But I would just learn over that last year or so when he was in the hospital for 2 months and then in a care facility, the VA care facility for 10 months, and then he passed away last August. But I would say I don't need to argue this one.
Mhm.
What was hard, and I don't know that I ever totally solved it, was when he said, I need help with something, but he couldn't make the right references, or I couldn't understand exactly. So I would ask again, please tell me what you want, and I would try to understand it. But then I'd also realize that things would go in his mind and then out his mind, so I didn't have to, dwell on it. Um, but those were the more challenging things. Um, yeah.
So may I ask one question of you, Alan? In going through this, it's wonderful that you've had an opportunity to at least enjoy some vacation time, doing some things together during this illness that was happening. How were you taking care of Alan yourself during all of this, especially as things progressed?
Okay, that's an excellent question, and I want to associate that with taking care of myself as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
so, I mean, I tried to spend as a reasonable amount of time with him. When he was home, he was reasonably functional, although in Christmas Eve of 2021, he fell backwards down the stairs in our three-story Victorian house and ended up in, it was right in the middle of COVID. He was at the General Hospital, San Francisco General Hospital for 3 weeks, and then in a rehab facility that he hated for 5 weeks. And I couldn't act. I was still working then, and I went out to visit him as much as possible. When he came back, he kind of healed up. So trying to spend enough time with him, keep him company when we ate dinner together and that sort of thing. But the other thing, particularly before the year before he left, he would say things like, "You care more about your friends than you do about me." And when he was out in the hospital and the care facility, I would go out every day, except once there was a 2 week COVID block, so I couldn't go out. But for that whole year, I would go out every day and stay 1 to 3 hours with him. And a lot of time towards the end, he would just be sleeping. So I realized I needed to take care of myself. So taking care of him was being with him, holding his hand, um, just trying to have conversation, bringing friends along too. Um, my friends, his friends, like his brother came out from North Carolina. I had some other dear friends who, at least several times a week would come out and visit him, and he perked up with that sort of thing. So that was good. But that was my I had to organize that um, to make sure that friends were okay coming. Um, but I also needed to take care of myself. And what did that mean? So when I went to work, it was easier but I retired in 2023 when I realized he was declining and I couldn't go to work. I was a school psychologist for almost 50 years, and I couldn't do the work and take care of him. And then it was that summer that he ended up in the hospital in the care facility. So I made a kind of early decision, but it was the absolute right decision because he was still home when I was made that decision to retire. Um, but it was so important for me to keep on doing my regular activities. Like going to the symphony, going to plays, going to my painting class, trying to be with friends sometimes. Of course, friends would come over when he was still there. Um, but, I think the message for caregivers is take care of yourself first, because if you get so stressed and depressed and all you're doing is um, sitting with the person and you can't do anything else, that's that's very hard. I'm sure there's some caregivers that say, "Oh, you need to be 24/7 with that person. You can never leave them." Uh, but for me, and I don't want to consider myself selfish, but I felt I had to balance that so that when I was with him, I could totally focus on being with him and, making him laugh sometimes or comforting him. Um, but the rest of the time, and we would talk later in the afternoon or in the morning, and I would usually go out and have lunch with him. That was my usual routine. I still had to take care of myself.
Just remembered Alan talking about this when we had our interview, and I was really impressed with something you'd said related to this, and that is that you said when I'm with Alan, I'm totally with him. I'm totally present
Yeah.
for that period of time. But when I'm not, I live my life. It's like that ability to hold sorrow and extreme losses. They're layered losses, and there are a lot of them, but also to experience the joy of being alive and still connected to people, not disconnected, because it's a precarious connection we have now with this person that we've loved, who is really no longer the person that we perhaps knew.
Yeah.
It's hard. And that ability I felt after talking with you to compartmentalize sounds like too technical, but to be able to hold both gently in your hand and be totally present with him, the way you said it was so sincere and so heartfelt. I just felt, caregivers need to know it's okay. I think you said something about don't feel you need to be a saint. um,
Right.
yeah. So that really, really touched me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you made such a good point there, Cindy. And Allan, thank you for sharing what you did during that time. So many caregivers do, they just run, 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 run. And what they don't see, if they could pull back and see the whole situation, is you're becoming less of you and you're becoming less for the one that you're trying to care for. If you let yourself run down that far, nobody wins in that.
That's right. I think one thing that I felt very fortunate about was the wonderful care that he got out at the
That's
VA.
great.
The nurses, the doctors, the recreation director, the social workers. So I didn't worry about him when I wasn't there. Now, not everybody has that opportunity.
Right.
They do have to spend thousands of dollars for, 24/7 in-home care. They may be at care facilities that the treatment is not so good. We talked about maybe moving him to another place, but then it just turned out to be the best place for him. And if something physical happened, the hospital was right down the block and they could just wheel him there. So, in that sense, I feel very fortunate. But I understand that other caregivers don't have that luxury in a sense. So, but still, it's so important that they take breaks. In fact, in that group, they talked about um, caregivers could send their patient to the VA for like respite for like a week or so, and actually place them there in care and just give the caregiver a break. And I think that's really important for that because, it's always in your mind, there's
Yeah.
no question about that. But while I tried to compartmentalize somewhat, of course I couldn't. I would talk to friends about Allan and so on, but um, but every caregiver needs a break. They need to, as you said, Cindy, enjoy life as much as they can.
I wonder if you could just say a word about guilt and shame, because it seems to me that so often it's that guilt that we should be doing more. And I'd love if you would close with just a few words of wisdom about that.
Well, that's a very good question. And as a school psychologist, I dealt with guilt and shame with kids a lot. And in recent years, I've seen that a lot of kids don't feel guilt and shame, and I feel like it's necessary. To me, guilt is when you intentionally do something to hurt somebody. And of course, shame is related. If you've made some embarrassing mistake or something like that, you feel shame. But to me, it's all about intention. And,
Mhm.
we don't have to be perfect at these things, and we don't have to feel ashamed as long as we try to make a difference, try to do what we can. We don't have to feel guilty about not doing more and more and more and more. Now, some people may feel like, when you marry, it's in sickness and in health, and you owe all that time. But I think guilt and shame, unless you did something really bad intentionally to hurt somebody, it doesn't help. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are wonderful words, Allan. So important for people to hear that. I am truly very grateful that we had this time with you today. I feel like we could sit here for another 3 hours and keep talking because you've placed some very valuable insight out here for our audience, and I am truly very grateful to you for that. Very grateful.
Thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.
So good to see you, Allan. Thank you so much for all you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us today here on another episode of All Things Caregiving. We are grateful that you're here and we look forward to seeing you again on a new episode. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
This has been All Things Caregiving from Breathing Spaces.